I want you to just look around the room you are in right now. Like, really look at the walls, maybe the furniture, the light filtering in through the window.
Yeah, just take it all in for a second.
Right. And it feels completely natural, doesn't it? It feels like your eyes are simply, well, like they're a video camera, passively recording the world and playing it back on a little screen inside your mind.
Which is how we all experience it, day to day.
Exactly. But what if that feeling is a complete illusion? Like, what if what you are actually experiencing at this exact second isn't a recording at all, but your brain frantically, desperately correcting its own internal hallucinations?
It's a pretty radical shift in perspective. We are so used to thinking of perception as a clear window to the outside world, right?
Totally.
But the biology tells a very different story. It suggests our perception is actually a highly controlled projection, basically coming from the inside out.
And that completely shatters how I think about my own daily life. I mean, we are jumping into a really fascinating document today, a deep dive on this paper called The Synaptic Theory of Consciousness by Dick Cookin.
A really dense but incredible read.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore this core argument that consciousness isn't some mystical state of being. And it's not a static recording of your environment either. It is the active physical correction that happens in your brain when your internal predictions fail to match reality.
That's the core of it, yeah. The mismatch is everything.
Okay, let's unpack this because I'm trying to wrap my head around that. How exactly is my brain predicting the room I'm sitting in right now?
So to get to the bottom of that, we really have to look at the brain's energy economy, like how it budgets power.
Okay, it's energy economy.
Right. The brain operates almost entirely on internal memory models. And the reason for that is because it is just incredibly energy intensive to process new information from scratch every single second.
Oh, that makes sense. Like building a house from the ground up every time you blink.
Exactly. So as you navigate the world, your brain is constantly predicting what should be there based on your past experiences. And when a prediction perfectly matches reality, the processing of that information is entirely unconscious. It takes literally no effort.
The text ties this to Daniel Kahneman's concept of System 1 thinking, right?
That's exactly.
That fast automatic processing that handles the vast majority of our decisions without us even realizing it.
That's the exact connection. And cognitive scientist Lisa Feldman Barrett, she confirms this in the source material as well. She points out that the brain doesn't just sit there passively receiving signals from your eyes and ears.
Right.
It is constantly constructing predictions based on, like, fragments of past memories. And when the incoming sensory signals match that internal prediction, the brain just lets them pass right through.
Because there's no problem to solve.
Right. There is no new information to learn, so there is no resistance in the neural pathways.
And because there is no resistance, there's no conscious awareness. Which, I mean, that makes total sense when you think about walking into a room you've never been in before.
Oh, absolutely. Think about that feeling.
The moment you step through the door, you are hit with this huge wave of conscious attention. You notice the color of the paint, the smell, the hum of the air conditioner. You are just highly conscious of it all.
Right, because everything is a mismatch.
Yeah.
Everything is new.
But then, if you sit in that exact same room for 20 minutes, your conscious awareness of those details just fades away. They just become background noise.
What's happening neurologically in that scenario is that your brain's internal memory model of the room has successfully updated.
It caught up.
Yeah, it now matches the reality of the room perfectly.
Yeah.
So your brain no longer has to correct its internal model. You are correcting less. So you're experiencing less.
The text uses the example of wearing glasses, which I love because I wear them. When you first put a pair of glasses on in the morning, you vividly feel the pressure on the bridge of your nose.
Oh yeah, it can actually be quite annoying at first.
Totally. But after a few minutes, you just completely lose the sensation.
But the sensory input hasn't stopped, right? The skin on your nose is still sending those pressure signals up to your brain.
Right, the physical glasses haven't vanished.
Right. But your brain has adjusted its prediction. Your internal memory now expects the glasses to be there. The mismatch disappears, the correction stops, and the feeling just vanishes entirely from your conscious awareness.
I do have to push back a little here, though. Are we saying consciousness is essentially just a biological autocorrect system? Like, do we only feel the world when our brain makes a typo in its predictions?
According to this theory, yes.
Wow.
Without a mismatch between what your memory networks expect and what your sensory organs report, there is absolutely no conscious experience. You just revert to biological autopilot.
If that's true, I feel like we need to understand what this autocorrect actually looks like on a microscopic level.
Yeah, let's look at the hardware.
Because the text dives into the raw numbers, pointing out that the average human brain has about 86 billion neurons.
Right, with about 16 billion of those dedicated specifically to the sensory brain and memory formation.
And they communicate across these things called synapses.
Exactly. And a synapse is essentially a microscopic gap between two neurons. It's incredibly tiny. We're talking about 1/3000th of a human hair.
That is impossibly small.
It really is.
Yeah.
Now, the sending neuron releases chemical signals or neurotransmitters across this gap, and the receiving neuron catches these chemicals using receptors on its branches, which are called dendrites.
Okay, so this gap, the synapse, this is where Kuiken's autocorrect mechanism physically takes place.
This is ground zero for it, yes.
The text focuses heavily on two specific enzymes involved in this process, kinase and phosphatase. What are they actually doing in that tiny gap?
You can think of these enzymes as like chemical volume knobs.
Okay, volume knobs.
Right. When there's a mismatch between your internal memory model and the incoming sensory reality, these enzymes kick into gear to adjust the receptor. Kinase acts to make the receptors more sensitive.
How does it do that?
It does this by physically adding a phosphate molecule to the receptor. This literally changes its shape so it can catch more neurotransmitters.
Oh, wow.
And then phosphatase does the opposite. It removes that molecule, making the receptor less sensitive. They're chemically tuning the synapse to match the incoming signal.
So it's like a lock and key mechanism that takes actual physical energy to turn?
Exactly.
But here's what I find so wild about this. We've covered other major theories of consciousness on these deep dives before. Like the global workspace theory argues that information becomes conscious when it's broadcast to the whole brain.
Right, the broadcasting idea.
And then Carl Friston's predictive processing agrees the brain minimizes prediction errors. But Cook and synaptic theory makes this massive leap beyond those.
It really does.
It argues that the physiological release of these enzymes, the literal chemical turning of that volume knob, is the conscious experience itself.
It completely flips the traditional script. The release of kinase and phosphatase isn't a background process that, causes consciousness as some secondary byproduct.
Right.
The physical energy expended by those enzymes, altering the receptor's shape, is the sensation of being aware. The moment the receptor is perfectly tuned, the chemical adjustment stops, the signal passes through effortlessly, and the experience instantly goes back to being unconscious.
I'm struggling a bit to visualize how this applies to something as complex as human vision, though. The text goes incredibly deep into the visual cortex. How does my brain constantly predict everything I am seeing right now?
It relies on a massive high-speed feedback loop. Let's break down the anatomy of it really quickly.
Okay, let's do it.
So your visual memories, like concepts of shapes, colors, motion, those are stored in the higher visual areas of the brain. These are regions known as V3, V4, and V5. You can think of them as the brain's visual archives.
The archives, got it.
Now, the primary visual cortex, known as V1, sits at the very back of your head. V1 acts like a blank movie screen. It receives the raw, unedited pixel data straight from your optic nerve.
And the text says this feedback loop between the archives and the screen happens, 30 to 100 times per second?
It is staggering. 30 to 100 times every single second. Those higher archive areas, the V3, V4, V5, are projecting a full visual memory downward onto the V1 screen.
30 to 100 times a second. That is unbelievable.
Right. And then the brain compares that projected memory to the raw pixel data coming in from your eyes. Only the differences, the mismatches, are sent back up the chain to trigger those enzymes and adjust the memories.
Wait. If my archives are constantly projecting memories onto my primary visual cortex and I'm just comparing them to the outside world, doesn't that mean I am effectively seeing my own memories? Like, am I just walking around in a hallucination?
In a sense, yes. You are seeing a virtual projection of your own memory fragments, but it is a controlled hallucination.
Controlled? How?
It is constantly pinned to reality by those bottom-up error signals. As long as your eyes are open, the physical light hitting your retina is providing the data that forces your internal hallucination to align with the real world.
Okay, that is deeply unsettling.
It is a little spooky.
It is. But it instantly makes me wonder about altered states. Like, if waking reality is just a hallucination that gets corrected by sensory data, what happens when we sever that sensory data entirely? What happens to this feedback loop when we go to sleep?
When you sleep and dream, you are experiencing pure virtual reality. The biological mechanism is exactly the same as when you are awake.
Really? Exactly the same.
Yep. The higher visual areas are still projecting memories back to V1. The exact same networks are firing, which is why a dream feels physically real while you are in it.
But because my eyes are closed, there's no reality check from the optic nerve.
Exactly. Without external input to restrict and correct those memory projections, they just associate freely.
So a memory of your childhood home might suddenly merge with, like, a memory of a coworker's face.
Precisely. The brain is wandering through its memory networks without any external data to force an autocorrect.
The source material connects this mechanism directly to psychedelics, too, specifically LSD, which is fascinating.
Well, this part is incredibly revealing.
Yeah, the text explains that psychedelics act as a chemical switch that suppresses external visual information. It essentially limits the brain's access to the outside world, even when your eyes are wide open.
Right. And at the same time, it blocks that external data. LSD also amplifies low-frequency brainwaves in the visual cortex, specifically waves around 5 hertz.
What does 5 hertz actually mean in the context of brain states, though?
So brainwaves are just synchronized electrical pulses. When you are awake and processing complex sensory data, your brain uses very fast waves like gamma waves around 40 hertz to handle the rapid influx of information.
Okay, fast waves for being awake.
Right. But 5 hertz is a slow, rhythmic theta wave. These slower waves are normally associated with deep internal processing, memory retrieval, and sleep.
Wow.
So when LSD amplifies these slow 5 hertz waves, it heavily activates an area called the retrosplenial cortex.
And the text notes the retrosplenial cortex is basically the brain's central hub for memory, navigation, and spatial orientation.
So just consider the state the brain is in here. It is starved of external visual data, but it is highly stimulated in its deep internal memory hubs.
And the brain abhors a vacuum.
It really does. So it begins filling the gap of the missing external data with its own internal memory fragments, projecting them outward.
Which totally explains why scientists in the text describe the psychedelic state as being biologically identical to partially dreaming while awake.
It's the exact same mechanism, just misapplied.
Your brain is projecting memories onto V1 just like a dream, but you are walking around with your eyes open. It's wild. But as a listener, I'm thinking this is a really fun philosophical theory, but how can we actually prove it? How do we prove that the brain actively deletes what it has perfectly predicted?
Right. It can't just be a thought experiment. The author provides a brilliant, testable example involving visual illusions. But to understand it, we first have to understand a tiny biological quirk of the eye called a microsaccade.
A microsaccade. That sounds like a tiny involuntary twitch of the eye.
That's exactly what it is. Up to 3 times per second, your eye makes this microscopic movement.
3 times a second.
Yes. And the classic scientific explanation for this is that it prevents retinal fatigue. The idea is that if an image stays perfectly still on the exact same light-sensitive cells in your retina, those cells get exhausted and the image fades. So the microsaccade constantly shifts the incoming light to fresh cells.
Okay, I want to keep that in mind because it completely upends this famous visual illusion called the lilac chaser.
Yes, this is the perfect example.
If you haven't seen this, imagine staring at a computer screen. On a white background, there is a tiny black cross right in the center.
Right.
Surrounding that cross, kind of arranged like the numbers on a clock face, are 12 blurry purple dots. But one dot is missing. There's just a blank space.
And that blank space rotates around the clock face, one step at a time. It creates the illusion that the purple dots are disappearing and reappearing in a circle.
And you are instructed to stare dead center at the black cross. Now, if I remember the textbook explanation for this from, psychology class, If you stare at the cross for a few seconds, the rotating empty space suddenly looks like a glowing green dot.
Yep, it shifts to green.
And if you stare even longer, the purple dots vanish entirely, and all you see is a single green dot running in a circle.
Which is such a bizarre
It
experience.
is, and I was always taught this is an after image. Like, you stare at purple so long that your red and blue retinal receptors get tired, so when the purple disappears, you see the opposite color on the color wheel, which is green.
That is the standard explanation.
Mhm.
But Kukin points out a massive biological flaw in that old theory. Remember those microsaccades we just talked about?
Right, the twitching.
Exactly. Your eye is involuntarily twitching 3 times a second. It is biologically impossible for those specific retinal cells to get fatigued because the image of the purple dots is constantly moving across different cells on your retina.
So the retinal fatigue theory is totally busted. I hadn't even thought about that. So what is the synaptic explanation for the green dot?
It all comes down to memory tuning. Purple is a composite color made of red and blue, right?
Right.
As you stare at the illusion, your brain's internal memory models for the colors red and blue in those specific locations become perfectly 100% tuned to the reality of the screen.
And as we established earlier, what happens when a memory perfectly matches reality?
It becomes unconscious.
Right. The signals for red and blue start passing through your synapses without any chemical resistance, without needing kinase or phosphatase, so you just stop consciously seeing them.
Now remember, the background of the screen is white. White light is a mixture of red, green, and blue light.
Okay.
Since your brain has tuned out the red and the blue, effectively making them unconscious, your brain only consciously experiences the leftover color in that white space.
Which is green.
Exactly.
The green dot isn't an after image at all. It's the conscious remainder of a white background after your brain literally deleted red and blue from your awareness.
It's an act of subtraction.
And the text notes that if you lose focus for even a millisecond, like if you get distracted, the purple dots instantly reappear. That's way too fast for fatigued cells to magically recover.
Right. It happens because your distraction disrupted the perfect prediction. It created a mismatch and forced your brain to release those enzymes and become conscious of the purple again.
It is a profound proof of concept. Like, we only see what our brain is actively trying to correct.
It really is.
This also perfectly explains the famous invisible gorilla experiment mentioned in the text.
Oh, that's another great one.
This is the classic study where you watch a video of people passing a basketball and you're told to count the passes. In the middle of the video, a person in a full gorilla suit walks right through the middle of the players, beats their chest, and walks off.
It sounds so obvious when you describe it.
But famously, the vast majority of people intensely focused on counting the passes never see the gorilla. But how is that physically possible? The light bouncing off the gorilla is still hitting their retinas. The raw data is still reaching V1.
It comes back to how the brain prioritizes that feedback loop. By focusing so intensely on the specific rule of counting the white basketball passes, you are actively driving a very demanding memory network.
Because you're constantly updating the count.
Exactly. That intense focus requires massive amounts of cognitive energy. So to maintain it, your brain literally starves the feedback loops for other irrelevant memory fragments.
How does it block them, though? Does it just ignore the data?
It's an active suppression. The brain uses inhibitory neurotransmitters to shut down the synaptic pathways related to anything outside your immediate focus. It literally denies those irrelevant synapses the chemical energy they need to release kinase and phosphatase.
So because the feedback loop for the concept of a gorilla is starved of energy, there is no synaptic memory formation happening in V1.
None at all.
And without the chemical adjustment of forming that memory, there's absolutely no conscious experience of the gorilla, even though your eyes physically captured the light. Without that synaptic autocorrect, you are functionally blind to it.
Exactly. The raw data is there, but the conscious experience is not.
Okay, so we have thoroughly mapped out the biological mechanics, the prediction, the mismatch, the enzymes chemically tuning the synapse. But I have a major lingering question here. We really have to address the philosopher David Chalmers and what he famously coined the hard problem of consciousness.
Ah, yes. The hard problem is arguably the biggest hurdle in neuroscience.
It's huge.
It asks, why does all this mechanical chemical tuning actually feel like a subjective emotion? Why does the experience of seeing a red stoplight feel completely different than seeing a red rose?
Right.
If consciousness is just kinase and phosphatase washing over receptors, where does the rich, inner, subjective feeling of a broken heart or like road rage come from?
Because chemicals binding to a receptor isn't an emotion.
Right. Quaken's text tackles this by arguing that Chalmers' concept of feeling as an isolated, abstract quality is a fundamental mistake.
A mistake.
Yes,
Yeah.
feeling is not some magical layer sprinkled on top of our biology. It is the first-person perspective of a highly integrated organism. You cannot separate the color red from what red means to your body biologically.
The text uses the example of feeling frustration at a red light. Like, if you were stuck at a red light when you're late for work, you don't just objectively see the color red.
No, of course not.
Your brain activates the memory concept that being late equals danger. That triggers interoceptive signals. Your nervous system physically tenses your muscles. And crucially, it triggers hormonal cascades.
Hormones are the key modulators of this entire system. Think about the physical feeling of a massive caffeine crash or an adrenaline rush. Hormones alter the overall environment of the brain.
Right.
Just like the memory of a piece of cake can trigger a tiny spike in dopamine, making the visual memory feel pleasant, the red light triggers an adrenaline spike.
So the feeling of frustration isn't some magical aura floating above the brain. It is the physical, biological totality of recognizing a red light, feeling your interoceptive muscle tension, and having adrenaline alter the tuning speed of your synapses all at exactly the same time.
The feeling is the total integration of those systems.
Okay, let me test this with an analogy. My home thermostat constantly makes a prediction. It predicts the room should be 70 degrees. Its sensor tells it the room is actually 65 degrees.
A clear mismatch.
Exactly. There is a mismatch. It activates a physical system to correct that mismatch until reality matches its prediction. Under the synaptic theory, does my thermostat have a tiny, basic level of consciousness?
The author explicitly says no.
Okay, why not?
And the reason ties right back to integration. A thermostat is not conscious because it lacks a massive network of interconnected meaning. It does not have interoceptive body signals warning it of danger. It does not have hormonal modulators like dopamine or adrenaline rushing through its system, altering its physical structure.
Right.
The thermostat processes data, but it doesn't integrate a biological state.
So the feeling of consciousness is the sheer complexity of all those biological systems adjusting simultaneously. The feeling is the total integrated state of the organism experienced from the inside as the synapses chemically adapt to the mismatch.
Yes.
You cannot separate the feeling from the physical biology. They are the exact same thing.
That is the essence of the synaptic theory. We experience the world only because we are constantly failing to predict it perfectly, and our brain is constantly doing the intense chemical labor of correcting those failures.
I love this because it has such a visceral application to daily life. Next time you travel to a new city or start a new job and you feel incredibly overwhelmed, hyper-aware, or physically exhausted at the end of the day, you aren't just tired.
No, you're chemically flooded.
Your brain is physically flooded with cranase and phosphatase. Your synapses are rapidly chemically tuning to a massive amount of unpredicted reality. Your hyper-awareness is literally the biological effort of learning. It completely reframes anxiety and overwhelm as a purely physical process of adaptation.
It takes the mystery out of the exhaustion, doesn't it? Your brain is burning calories to build a new model of reality.
It makes me respect my brain a lot more, honestly, but it also leaves me with a lingering, almost haunting thought based on this text.
What's that?
Well, if consciousness only exists in the mismatch between our past memories and new experiences, what happens when we stop trying new things?
Oh, that's a profound point.
Like, if you live the exact same routine every single day, walking the same path, talking to the same people so perfectly that your brain eventually predicts every single moment with zero errors, do you eventually cease to be conscious at all? Something to think about the next time you decide whether to take a new route home.